Coming to you live from the Vermont Wild Kitchen.
So this is what you're looking at. You can use cheese, you can use fresh dill, rosemary, any seasonings that you like. Get creative, make your own. These are gonna go in the smokehouse with the snack sticks.
So this recipe calls for like about a quarter cup's worth of chaga chunks, and then really only a couple slices of reishi mushrooms. Here's an example. There is this really beautiful brick red mushroom with this really gorgeous gloss and white all along the edge.
We'll stick it in the oven, and it's done.
The magic of television. All right, so let's get this going. My name is Shane Rogers, and I am the Farm to Plate Communications Manager at the Vermont Sustainable Jobs Fund, and I run the Rooted in Vermont program. And I am here tonight bringing you Vermont Wild Kitchen. And for tonight, we have a great lineup of people. We have Steffi Drago and Abigail, Serra, and Jeffrey Whipple, who are both game wardens. We are going to let them introduce themselves here in a second. But just a little thing before we get started. Vermont Wild Kitchen is this creation between Rooted in Vermont and the Vermont Farm to Plate Network, with the goal to really showcase how wild food and local fresh Vermont food really go hand in hand together. So for our episodes, we try to feature something a little wild and also something a little grown. And we are really looking forward to the episode tonight. As you're all tuning in, please feel free to drop comments in the chat, share your wild kitchen stories that you have, share recipes that you might like, or just ask questions for our presenters, and we'll make sure that they get them and can address those questions. So without further ado, I'm going to ask Steffi to introduce herself.
All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Stephi Drago, and I'm here tonight to talk about mushroom foraging. I am an amateur beginner forager as well as an amateur beginner cocktail experimenter. I work in water resources in the state. I work for the University of Vermont, do a lot of GIS work and mapping work with floodplains and floodplain restoration. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. Just really love foraging. Also a hunter, excited to talk about some fun wild food and mushrooms and tea and bourbon. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Steffi. We're gonna get the Steffi segment here in the second half of our show. And without further ado, I would like to introduce Abigail, Serra, and Jeffrey Whipple, who are both game wardens with Vermont Fish and Wildlife, and they are going to be doing an amazing demonstration with sausage and some cooking as well. So I will let them take it from here. And again, folks, if you have any questions, thoughts, please feel free to drop them in the chat, and we will ask them of our wonderful presenters. All right, Abigail and Jeff, take it away.
Hi, I'm Abigail. Tonight I'll be cooking a dish for you guys that's made out of sausage. And it's just like one of the many, many ways that you can use sausage. And the sausage that we're making tonight is venison sausage. And Jeff here,
Hey guys.
He's going to be the one making the sausage.
Yeah, I'm Jeff Whipple, I'm game warden up in Orange County. We're going to make a few different kinds of, or we're going to make some snack sticks for you. We're going to show you something to do that's pretty interesting after harvest, and then a unique way to use the deer that you actually harvest. So yeah, we're looking forward to it. Thanks for having us.
All right, thanks folks. So we're going to jump right into your sausage making and sausage cooking. So feel free to take it away.
So I'm going to take my mask off. We are a distance far enough apart here. We are at Camp Piho, and we are going to be setting up some basic snack stick making. So, like Abby said, we've got some ground venison here, so we're going to run. Tonight we're going to make some pepperoni snack sticks. To show you some equipment, this is a sausage stuffer. We've pre-ground some meat, so we've pre-ground some venison mixed with some pork. So we want to do about a 20% on wild game, so 20% pork fat mix with your wild game. So that's You can go for moose, bear, deer, anything like that. So we'll go ahead and get started. So we've got our premix. Tonight we're gonna make some pepperoni. So these packets can come in all sorts of flavors. There's an unlimited amount of flavors out there online. So tonight we're gonna use pepperoni. It's pre-mixed for 5 pounds. We don't have quite 5 pounds here, so we're gonna kind of just adjust that a little bit. So we'll go ahead and dump that in. And these are wonderful when they come out of the smokehouse. They're a great product for sure.
Jeff, where would you pick up those spice packets that you're using tonight?
That's a great question. So I've used all sorts of different websites. Walton's Meat is my go-to. Amazon carries lots of different products too. So you can find them by just a simple Google search.
And what would you use if you didn't have a packet? Like what spices?
Yes, you can go crazy with your own sausage. You can make all sorts of different flavors. If you wanted to do your own version of like a breakfast sausage or a bratwurst, I'm going to show you some product here in a few minutes after that we made earlier today. But you can use pretty much, sky's the limit on that. You can add fun things. We're going to add some cool stuff here to kind of make it a unique twist on what you're going to do for your product. So we're going to continue to mix here in a little bit. So keeping the sausage cold is a good rule of thumb to not only for your safety, but for working of the product. So here I've got some high temp Swiss cheese. So this is kind of a fun product. It's important to use a high temp cheese just because when you run these through your smoker, it's not going to melt on you. So when I first started making sausage and snack sticks, I did not use high temp cheese, and I had a whole puddle of melty cheese on the bottom of my smoker, which my dogs really enjoyed, but it was quite a mess. So I'm going to add some cheese in here. This part, totally optional. This is pink salt, so it comes in pre-measured packets you can use, or you can buy this commercially. This is not like a pink Himalayan salt. This actually has nitrates in it. It's going to preserve the product. It's going to allow it to not have to be refrigerated. So you can leave your house, throw some of these in your lunch pail, go out all day, and they will be perfectly fine. So I got some pre-measured for some 5 pounds here. Going to sprinkle that in.
So if you didn't want to use that, you just have to refrigerate them, right?
Absolutely. You just have to refrigerate them. This is going to give you a little bit of a color. So it's going to be kind of a more reddish color. So it'll actually, and it's going to increase that flavor. It's a tanginess too. So we've got the pink salt in there. Big thing with snack sticks that you don't so much have to do with other sausages that we're going to show you is a sure gel binder or some sort of binder. This is a product that you can buy too. You can use a whey protein, and you can use all sorts of different. I've even seen people use like a skim milk for a binder. So we dump a little bit of that in there. We get a little bit heavy on that.
And what does a binder do?
So that's going to increase mouthfeel. So when we bite into a sausage, and when I first started doing this, they were awfully dry and crumbly. So mouthfeel is kind of a weird term, but it's going to make that nice. Think about if you buy a Slim Jim from a store. That's essentially what we're making. So it's going to continue to stay moist throughout the process.
I'm definitely glad, Jeff, that you took it upon yourself to go through all those bad experiments, so we didn't have to.
You know, it takes some practice, but there's really no bad sausage. It's just
There's a leaky sausage though.
A leaky sausage, and you will always 100% of the time end up with, at the very least, dog treats. So we're mixed up here. This machine here is a sausage stuffer, so this is kind of important for this part of the process. So when you buy a meat grinder, so we didn't talk about grind, so we have ground this meat through our grinder. We ground it through twice when we added the spices, or when we added the pork fat. So grinder is an essential thing here. And grinders, you can go from anything to a hand grinder, which will be about $15 on Amazon, to all the way up to commercial like we have. But same thing with stuffer. So when you buy your grinder, if you buy even a $150 grinder, it's going to come with some stuffing horns, so you can actually do this right off of your grinder at home, rather than have to have this whole machine. So this machine just makes it easier. Sorry, it's awful hot in here with our fireplace.
Yeah, we thought the fire would create some ambiance, but it actually is just
so I'm a huge
creating a sauna.
Huge fan of Rachel Ray, and now that she does Rachel Ray at home, she always has the fireplace going. And now I realize, like, I don't know how she wears those sweaters and actually can do this, but So this is the stuffer. This is an 11-pound stuffer. They make them all the way down to 3 pounds. So you get a 3, 5, 7, and then you can go all the way up to some really, really big ones.
What's the if you wanted just to buy a cheap stuffer, like how much do they cost? Like, do they make small ones?
Yeah. So this stuffer was, I think, about $120, but you can get them all the way down to about a $55 range. The cheapest ones they make, which work wonderful, and I've made hundreds of pounds out of one. Is a hand plunger. So there's actually like a hand sausage plunger type thing out there, and that's about $35. And I've literally used mine for hundreds of pounds, like I said. So we're gonna go ahead and put some of this pre-mix with our cheese in here. We're gonna stuff it in. I'm gonna show you a little tip here when we get it filled up.
And what are you using for casings on here?
Yeah, so there's all sorts of varieties of casings. When we get into snack sticks, you want to use a collagen fibrous casing that's edible, obviously, because we don't want to peel these when we finish up our product out of the smokehouse. So these are going to be an edible casing. I'll go ahead and show you. This is a pack from Lem. So I do a lot of business through them. This is a collagen casing that is edible. Like I said, it's a 19 millimeter, so you can get them all the way down to 10 millimeter. I would recommend, if you're new to making snack sticks, go with the 19s, because the 10s are really, really hard to stuff. They're really time consuming, and they take a long time in the smokehouse. You can easily overdo them where they're going to crack.
So they're skinnier, right?
Much skinnier.
Yeah.
So here's a little tip when you put your meat in your stuffer. So this plunger is going to act down. It's got a rubber seal on it, so it's going to compress, and as it compresses, it's going to push your meat product out the end of this tube. I've already preloaded one of those collagen casings onto this stuffing horn. When you put it down in there, I like to kind of tamp it down to get all the air out, because what you don't want is air pockets inside your stuffing casing. Go ahead and set this down here. So that actually locks in place like that. And then this comes down. There's a handle. This is a 2-speed stuffer. So you can actually, there's a setting that goes much faster in the gear ratio. So you can actually speed up when it compresses down. And you'll feel when it hits where the meat product is. When this stuff's on, so another pro tip is I like to put a little vegetable oil on here. It makes this slide off a lot easier. So as the meat comes out, this is going to fill. And I preload these on here. You can use a smaller stuffing horn, where one of these will actually, so you can actually slide the whole thing on there. The problem with the smaller stuffing horn is it puts a lot of work on this machine, and it's really hard to crank down. So doing them alone, I use this is a 17 millimeter horn with a 19 millimeter casing, so you've got that 2 millimeter gap. So I'm going to engage in my sausage here.
So Jeff, you said you're using venison. Is there any other wild game meat that you've used in the past, or is that generally the best go-to?
I would say not. Is it the best? It's pretty good. I've done a lot of moose. Waterfowl is actually wonderful in this process. I've had some of the best snack sticks I've ever had came from Canadian geese. The problem that I found when I have harvested geese is my grinder does not like shotgun pellets. So you really want to search through your meat to make sure you're not grinding any foreign objects. So I push that out. I don't tie it off until I can start to see the meat come out, because it's going to push the air out through. So you can see I made just a simple square knot in there. We'll back up. And when we engage, it'll push out through. And don't worry about making links here. This is just, you're making a solid rope. Don't overfill it, because they will break. They're pretty rugged, but when they pop, then you've got to start your process over and tie it off. And sometimes you have to kind of help it a little bit, just so you avoid that breaking. You want a nice, firm, filled casing, because if there's any gaps or air pockets in there, when you run it in your smoker or your smokehouse or your oven, it will make a shriveled, kind of dry product. So you get bring it down to the end here. Normally, if I'm going to run a link, I like to do about 5 feet. That just works well in my smokehouse because I can drape them over my hangers. I've overfilled this one just a little bit, so what I'll do is I'll just come back down and then I'll put it into another. When I reload this, I can just recycle that. So same thing, simple square knot on this end, and then the product is almost ready for the smokehouse.
That was very satisfying to watch. I'm not gonna lie.
So
it's like you can have your own channel, Jeff, on Instagram of just you stuffing sausages.
It very much is. In my shop when I'm working, I could make one of those weirdly satisfying YouTube videos.
Exactly.
When we get into this next product I'm going to show you, it's definitely a weirdly satisfying thing. So this is what you're looking at. It's this is a short one, but I can easily hang this in my smokehouse. I've got racks that I can loop them up over the top, and I'll fill them up. And so when we run these in the smoker, we're going to smoke them until the internal temp is 160 degrees. If you go above that, you're going to start melting your pork fat that's in there. But 160, we know for wild game, is the proven safety cutoff. So at 160 degrees, we are 100% ready to eat that. So how long is that going to take? It's totally up to your smokehouse. So if your smokehouse, I run mine, I start about 2 hours at 125 degrees because you're going to get that wonderful smoke flavor in there. Sausage is interesting. If you learn about smoking sausage, when sausage gets up to a certain point, then it won't take any more smoke. So at that point, I like to get my smoke flavor in before I start the cooking process. So I get the cooking. I get my smoke flavor infused, then I'll start bringing the smoker or the smokehouse up to a higher temp. And I'm coming up to 175, and then I'm going to finish at around 225. And that's going to take about an hour or so, and these are going to be good to go. Another tip I've learned, when they come out of the smokehouse, you probe them, check them. They come out of the smokehouse, and I'll have a tote, that I've cleaned, and it's got ice water, freezing cold ice water. I will throw these right directly into that ice water. It instantly shocks them and stops the cooking process, and it creates a really nice, thick sausage. I've tried it other ways where I haven't used that and just let them air cool down, and they will shrink up to pretty small, and it's kind of, you have all that product and then you waste it. So I'm going to show you some other cool things that we've made. Earlier today, we made up some summer sausage. So this is exactly like this. This is just a lot bigger of casing. These guys are anywhere. This is probably a 3.5 pound. This is a summer sausage blend that I've bought. It comes pre-mixed. Same thing. You can use cheese. You can use fresh dill, rosemary, any seasonings that you like. Get creative. Make your own. These are going to go in the smokehouse with the snack sticks. These are pre-bought casings. These casings technically are edible, but they're pretty tough. They come with these little ties on them, so I can hang them in there. Same process, exact same process. They will take a little bit longer to cook, but you're still going to have that wonderful smoke flavor. And as far as smoke, what do I use? So I would use, I'm a huge fan of pecan smoke. I make my own pecan and apple blend. That works good. Hickory works well too. There's another product we made this afternoon. These are Venison Bratwurst. So these are rope links that we've linked all together. These are amazing for a cookout in the summertime. Same thing, same exact pork fat, wild game mixture. This is a bratwurst seasoning that I bought. You can add your, if you want to add for your binder, your favorite light beer works perfect for these guys. These are natural casings, so these are natural casings that you can buy at most meat shops. And I also bought these online. But
intestines.
Pretty much, yeah.
Do you, so Jeff, if someone doesn't say have access to a smoker, is there any other way that they could be engaging with wild game sausage?
Yeah, absolutely. These guys, you can smoke them, but these are ready for the grill. You could throw them right on your gas grill, and they're good to go, just like any kielbasa from the store or anything you bought, a commercial product. Now, snack sticks don't have to go into a smoker. You can absolutely cook them in your oven. You can finish them. I wouldn't probably do that 2 hours at 125. I would bring them up to probably about 150 for about an hour, and then finish at 180 to 200.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
You bet. Yeah. Sorry, we're kind of rushed.
I don't know about Steffi, but every time I am on the computer end of this Vermont Wild Kitchen, I just get insanely jealous of all the amazing food that gets made that I just don't have access to at the time. So I appreciate you making my mouth water, without a doubt.
Yeah, as soon as this is over, we're probably going to go whittle up some maple saplings and right over those coals.
Oh, that sounds amazing. So
I can get started with my portion if you'd like now, or whatever works.
Definitely. That's what I was going to say. I think we're ready to see how to cook up some of this amazing wild game sausage.
Yes, and well, I'll talk about it once Jeff takes the camera, but I've cooked up loose sausage. So there's other ways to make sausage, obviously, besides links, and most people don't have access to a stuffer and stuff like that without, purchasing it first. So the way I typically make sausage is just to, grind it up with spices and stuff, and then cook it loose, so not in a link. So that's how I'll be showing how to a dish that I make with it.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
And while we have the opportunity, I do want to plug that Vermont Fish and Wildlife is doing their Green Mountain Conservation Camps this year for kids ages 12 through 15. So they're open to anybody, and you basically go and spend a week in the woods going fishing and shooting and learning all these skills that could lead you eventually to being a master sausage maker, just like Jeff and Abby.
Yeah, and actually where we are right now is the Green Mountain Conservation Camp at Camp Kehoe. So this is the fire we to enjoy right here.
Hopefully not in the middle of summer.
No, I'll take a little peek out the window. There's some cabins out here. I don't know if you can see them.
Amazing.
Yep.
Yeah, it makes me, this might be the only time I wish I was 15 again.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'll hand the camera over to Jeff.
We're going into the inner workings of Kehoe into our kitchen here.
I like this behind the scenes. I feel like this is the sign of really coming into our own as a cooking show, is getting into a commercial kitchen and the behind the scenes. I'm waiting for Guy Fieri to jump out with his spiky hair and some taglines.
Yeah, Gordon Ramsay was here earlier helping us out. He had to go on to another place.
So I prepared a lot of this ahead of time because I knew I wouldn't have enough time to show you guys everything. But I'll sort of walk you through putting it together at the very least.
And what are you going to be preparing, Abigail?
What was that?
What are you going to be preparing tonight?
So I'm preparing what I call Russian pie, and there's many different types of Russian pie. This is going to be a cabbage Russian pie with sausage, and it's something that my mom used to make for us when we were kids all the time, and it was like one of my favorite things that she would make. So I just recently rediscovered it, I guess, and started making it again. So the first thing you want to do to make this is just saute up some cabbage and onions. So you can see some there that I've already done. I charred them a little bit, burnt a little bit, but they'll still be good. Burnt onions are good. And then I also cooked up, and this is the sausage that I was talking about earlier. This is just loose sausage. So this stuff, it's really delicious. It's seasoned just like you'd have in the links, but there's no casings, obviously. You could make this dish with sausage and casings if you just sliced it up into rounds, but there's no need for it if you have, just loose sausage, which is pretty easy to make. And like Jeff was saying before, there are hand grinders that you can purchase for, not very much money, that you can actually grind your own sausage. Some people, I've actually done this before. It doesn't have a really fine grind, but if you chop meat up with like a cleaver, over and over and over and over again on a cutting board, you can cut it into tiny little pieces and get it small enough so that it's sort of like, hamburger or sausage. And then if you season it with the right seasoning, it's sausage. So there's many different ways to do it. You don't have to have a big commercial grinder, although that's very helpful if you're doing large batches. So first what we'll start off with is the crust. I made this crust with, for one pie, you use 2 cups flour, 1 stick of butter, and then you just cut the butter into very small pieces into the flour, mix it until it's like pea-sized amounts, and then add a little bit of cold water until the mixture kind of holds together. Then you can roll out your crust, throw it in the pan like I did here. So the next step is you take some softened cream cheese, and this makes it really good. So I'll pop this open. If your cream cheese is kind of hard, you'll just want to cut it into small pieces to line the pan. But this stuff I had kind of warming on top of that rack over there, so it should be spreadable. So we'll take that and then just kind of spread it around. It doesn't have to be exact, really. It's going to be going in the oven and it will be cooking after this. Just throw it all in there.
And I just have to add that this recipe is a great recipe for incorporating all those delicious, rooted in Vermont local ingredients with your wild game. You could use Cabot cream cheese. You can use cabbage from your farm stand, your favorite farm stand or CSA, and really they just pair wonderfully.
Yeah, and that's another thing I did want to mention. Thanks for bringing that up. This dish is really a very wintertime dish. So you have your cabbage, which you can store that for a little while in your basement, and then you have, we'll be getting to it, but your boiled eggs, you know, and you have like all this stuff. The onions store well as well. So those are all things that I don't want to say they're in season, obviously, because it's wintertime, but they're kind of in season as far as storage vegetables.
They're called storage crops for a reason.
Yes. Okay, so now we got that spread out. What we'll do next is take our boiled eggs, and everybody knows how to boil an egg, so I won't go into that. But I take 4 boiled eggs and I just slice them up right over that cream cheese. When I forgot to mention, when I saute my cabbage and onions, I definitely add some salt, some pepper, and yeah, it's basically just salt and pepper. If you want to make it spicy, add some hot pepper flakes. I always do that because I like spice. So spread those around. And really, however many eggs, it's kind of your own preference, but 4 usually does a good job to cover the bottom of the pan. Okay, so once we have those in there, what I'll do next is take the sausage. And there's no real exact amount. You just fill it, you know, however much meat you want in there. I like it pretty meaty, and this is a sausage cooking show, so I'll fill it right up.
What kind of flavor of sausage would you recommend?
That's really up to you. I would say hot Italian would be really tasty because I like hot sausage, but you could use, this is the kielbasa seasoning, the links that we had in there, that you showed you, the ones that were twisted. That's what this is. So, I mean, any sausage will work, really. And then we'll take our cabbage and put it right on top of that. Just basically layers. And then kind of push it down. Okay. And then take our crust. Put some flour on it. Knock the flour off a little bit. Put it on top. And you want to just make sure it's kind of sealed in there because it's going in the oven. So I just kind of fold it up and under like this around the edge.
This looks like it's just going to stick right to your ribs. It looks amazing.
Yeah, it sure does. It's it's pretty delicious.
We have a few more months before Beachbody season.
Oh, this is good for you though. I mean, there's nothing bad in this, you know. This is good food here. You can crimp the edges if you want, but as long as you have them sealed, it's usually good to go. And then just poke a couple holes in the top to let steam out. You can make a pretty design if you want. And then it's just ready for the oven. So we'll stick it in the oven. And I usually put it in here on 425 degrees until it's golden brown. And it's done.
The magic of television.
High efficiency cooking here in Castleton tonight.
Yep, I mean, this oven was really hot today, so it only took a second, but typically it takes around like 35, 40 minutes until it's golden brown like this. So we'll cut it. Oh, you got a knife there? So we'll slice right into this thing. I'll show you.
Laura on Facebook says cream cheese, boiled egg, sausage, and cabbage and onion sounds amazing, which I could not agree with more.
Let me grab a plate.
I would add too, I think there's so many opportunities if you all have kids to get your kids in the kitchen making that crust. I mean, learning knife skills, cutting up some meat if you don't have a grinder. So it seems like a great recipe to involve the whole family if you have the chance.
Yeah, and one thing one tip I'll mention with making the crust is if you haven't ever made your own crust from scratch before, it's really important that you mix the butter into small pieces before you add the water. So once you add the water, you just want to very quickly get it together and roll, not work it very much. Because once you add the water, if you start working it and stirring it a lot, you'll have super tough crust. So you want to make sure that butter is all mixed throughout before you add any water. And you don't add very much water at all, just enough so that the crust will hold together. And that's it. And then you don't want to be stirring it a lot after you add that water. Otherwise, you'll have really thick crust. And I learned that the hard way. My mom makes pies, and she sells them during the summertime. And she's a great pie maker. But the first time I made a pie, the crust was pretty tough. And I don't know, this one might be tough too because I was talking to Jeff when I was making it, and I was just mixing away, and I was like, oh no, I already added the water. But yeah, here it is.
Awesome.
And you can see on the bottom the cream cheese and egg. It's so good. It looks a little bit of a mess, but it's delicious.
That looks wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that recipe, your family recipe at that. Oh, all right, Abigail, Jeff, did y'all have anything you wanted to add before we switched over to Steffi?
Her mouth's full, so I'll say, no, I think we're good.
Well, thank you so much, both of you. It's always a pleasure to have a couple of game wardens on with us, and you all are always just troopers for making up some delicious wild games. So with that being said, I am very excited to introduce Steffi Drago next. And she is going to be, like she said, diving in on the wonderful world of mushrooms, which is something near and dear to my heart. So without further ado, I will throw it over to her. And I tried to unmute you. There we go.
There we are. Well, hello, everybody. And yeah, thank you so much for that lovely tutorial. I am now very hungry. That was super fabulous. But yeah, today I thought I'd talk a little about some mushroom kitchen adventures you can do in the winter when, of course, foraging isn't really at its peak. But over the last year, of course, with quarantine and all, I started to explore the world of cocktails. Also, this is Binks. He will be here moseying around probably throughout the duration. Yeah, so I just kind of started about last year trying to learn about the world of cocktails. And as somebody who's really interested in foraging, I have been really trying to explore the world of using things that I can go out into the woods and forage and incorporating them in a cocktail. So in the spring, I got into doing some violet syrups, so doing some violet gin and tonics, as well as some berry syrups and incorporating that into different cocktails. But then when fall and winter came around, I was really trying to think, how can I incorporate wild edibles into a cocktail? And I had this idea. I had foraged a bunch of chaga last year, and I had so much reishi that, and I knew both were really good in teas, so I figured, why not find a way to make a mushroom tea into a cocktail. So the recipe itself isn't super involved. So I figured I'd spend a little bit of time talking about the mushrooms themselves, how we can go out and identify them, sorry, Binks is getting into stuff again. But yeah, how we can go out, how we can forage these mushrooms. Chaga is really cool because it's actually a mushroom you can forage in the winter. So without further ado, here, over here is my little station with the ingredients for the tea. So first we're gonna start off, I'll just kind of go over the more basic ingredients, really for the flavoring. For this tea, I will use 4 cinnamon sticks, just a pinch of nutmeg. I usually use about kind of a 2-inch chunk of ginger, and just a handful of cloves. So I like to make this tea in the crock pot. Chaga, for a lot of recipes I've seen for chaga tea, it requires it to be brewed for several hours at a low temperature. So I find the crock pot to be a really great way to do this. I have done it on the stove and forgot about it. I've got a kind of finicky electric stove and definitely ended up evaporating all of my water and burning all of my mushrooms. So if you have a reliable stove, you can just do it on the stove top, but I find that the crock pot works super well. So you're gonna fill your crock pot up with about 10 to 16 cups of water. And you wanna just put this on low. We're gonna toss all of these ingredients in, the cinnamon, the ginger, the cloves, a little bit of nutmeg. And next I wanna dive into these 2 mushrooms we're also gonna throw into the tea. So this recipe calls for like about a quarter cup's worth of chaga chunks, and then really only a couple slices of reishi mushrooms. So I want to dive in talking about reishi first, because those are the ones you're gonna have to search for in the late spring. And honestly, I've seen them all the way through late summer in some cases. But these reishis, or especially the ones that I find around here, are also called hemlock varnish shells. That's one species. I do believe we have a species that grows on hardwood as well, but I tend to find these hemlock varnish shelf version of the reishi a little bit more often. For a picture of what they look like when they're not sliced up and dried, here's an example. There is this really beautiful brick red mushroom with this really gorgeous gloss and white all along the edge. And so they're really quite easy to spot, just like this beautiful red shelf mushroom. It's a polypore, so it means there are pores on the bottom and not gills like you would see on an oyster or portobello mushroom. But with reishi, you want to try to get them while they're young, which I feel like is the case with a lot of mushrooms when you're foraging. So before they fan out too big, usually when they're smaller, especially if you get something kind of the size of your fist, that's not a bad place to start. The bigger the mushroom is, the older it is, the woodier it is, and the harder it's going to be to work with. So I definitely recommend trying to get them while they're young. And the best way, once you find these reishi mushrooms, is just to cut them into these small little slivers, if you can see here. Yeah, and if you have a dehydrator, that's the perfect way to dry them out. I don't have a dehydrator yet, so what I do is I just get a cutting board, line it with some paper towels, put the mushrooms on top, and then just let them sit out for a couple days. They'll dry eventually. You might want to swap out the paper towel every so often. But that seems to work pretty well for me just in general when I'm drying mushrooms. You can also set the oven on a really low temperature and stick them in there like overnight or so, depending on the mushroom you're working with. But I feel like air dry works just as well.
I commandeered my partner's drying rack for to be able to put them out, so they were just all throughout the kitchen all summer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, racks are super great too. I need to get one of those eventually. Yeah. But a couple of cool things about reishis before we move on to chaga. They are known to be the mushroom of immortality. They have a lot of really great health benefits and have been used in traditional medicines for thousands and thousands of years. So yeah, a really gorgeous, really abundant mushroom. I find really quite often in Vermont. It was the first mushroom that I just would go on a hike and I'd see it. I'm like, I have too much. I can't take any more. So yeah, here's a little jar I have. I've got another sitting over on my mushroom shelf. I've got a lot of reishi for a while. Next, we can talk about chaga. And chaga is great because it's really around year-round, and it is a mushroom that is really commonly foraged in the winter, and really, at least in Vermont, one of the only mushrooms we can find in the dead of winter. So chaga is very different. it seems like this is a mushroom a lot of folks might be familiar with. It's really kind of an up and coming thing with like chaga and coffee and all of this fun stuff. But chaga looks kind of like this big black barky mass that grows out of a birch tree. You can tell that it's chaga compared to some other burls because the burls will look kind of like, or like some other funguses will look like they're growing on the tree, where chaga pretty distinctly looks like it's growing out of the tree. It's known to kind of have this little controversial aspect to it, where some folks say that it's parasitic to the birch trees, and others say that it's kind of got this nice symbiosis going on. But one of the reasons why folks say it's best in the winter is because the birch tree is dormant. It means there's more nutrients stored in the chaga, so you can get more of those positive health benefits. Because once again, we're talking about a mushroom that's really renowned for being pretty healthy for you. So in the end, this cocktail is actually really good for you. So some tips about harvesting chaga. Chaga is a very slow growing mushroom or fungus, so it's really important to be very mindful of the size of the chaga you are taking and how much you are taking. It's also a very hard fungus, so whenever I go out to harvest chaga, I always bring my hand axe to do so. So you should never harvest chaga that is smaller than a softball. You want to make sure that it's grown quite big, and you never want to take more than half. That's a really good rule for any beginning foragers out there in order to really sustain these communities and these species and individual mushrooms. We want to make sure we're not taking more than we should. And as I mentioned, I use a hand axe in order to harvest this. It's really important to be careful while you're doing that, not to sink into the tree itself because you can damage the tree. So it is something you want to be a little bit more careful and mindful when you're harvesting it because you can hurt the tree, and we don't want to over harvest our chaga so then they don't regenerate quickly enough. It's important to want to help our mushroom friends as well as enjoy them too. So with chaga, it's really unique because you'll see it's this kind of hard black bark shell, but on the inside, it's this really beautiful brick kind of orange color, almost kind of like the reishi, this kind of fibrous, orangey, bright color. I think over time with these, it's gotten a little bit browner, but fresh chaga is usually almost like not too different from this sweater. So that's one way that you'll know that it's chaga. And as I mentioned, it's a very tough fungus. So it's important once you harvest it, you want to chop it up into your little chunks pretty quick because once it dries, it is rock hard. What I did for drying out chaga is I just kind of chunked it up, put it in a jar, let it air dry for a while, and it's been great. You can also do the oven trick for this, or I'm sure you can also use a dehydrator, but there's generally not as much moisture in chaga as you'll find in reishis or other more fleshy mushrooms. And once again, as I mentioned, chaga is known to have a lot of great health benefits as well. So, like I said, we put all this stuff in our crock pot. We waited 4 hours, and when we're done, we have this beautiful, almost coffee-like colored tea. And of course, I think the cinnamon really comes through pretty strongly in this recipe, which is great. It really adds kind of a warmth and a heat. And both mushrooms, chaga, and I think specifically reishi, I've really only had these in the context of this cocktail, but I've heard they can be quite bitter. So that's something to keep in mind when drinking this, but you can just have it on its own. You can have it with honey. I like to actually, in the morning, I'll make some black tea just to get my caffeine and just add some of this tea in to add a nice kind of cinnamony flavor to it. But now that our tea is made, we can move over to the cocktail part. I might have to ask my assistant to move so he doesn't get in the way of the hot liquid. I think he's settled. Okay. So this is a pretty easy recipe. It's only 3 ingredients for once you have the tea made itself. But I like to start with around 2 ounces of whiskey or bourbon. Of course, use your favorite. And then we will add in our hot tea. just as much as you like. And then lastly, because at its kind of the nature of this tea is a little bit more bitter, I do like to add a good amount of honey into this recipe here. So, you know, a tablespoon or two, whatever you feel like. It's, you know, whatever will do the trick for you, your sweetness level. And you just give it a stir. And it's a really quick and easy way to take advantage of some really awesome, like a cool way to incorporate mushrooms into something other than, you know, just like a pasta dish or whatever have you. These mushrooms are kind of unique in that they're used a lot in like broths and teas. So yeah, a fun way to incorporate some really fun mushrooms and fungus that we can find around Vermont. Something specifically we can forage in the winter and then enjoy on a really nice, cold winter or fall day. So,
and Steffi, thank you so much. I feel so warm with all the dishes being made today, the hot toddy and the cabbage wild game pie. But for those who are interested in learning more about foraging and mushrooms, or who don't feel confident, do you have any suggestions on field guides or Facebook groups or anything that you would turn them to?
Yeah. So I use this little, I'm not sure if you can quite see that super well. I don't know if there's a bit of a glare, but it's the National Audubon Society Mushroom Field Guide. It's usually what I bring out into the field with me. I recommend starting with mushrooms that are really tricky or mushrooms that don't have a lot of lookalikes. We have a lot of mushrooms around here that are very distinct and unique and don't have anything that looks a lot like them. So you can be pretty confident, like, this is what I'm eating. It doesn't have a poisonous lookalike. Another resource that I've really enjoyed is actually an app called iNaturalist that I have on my phone. I can go out in the field. This is how I've learned a lot of mushrooms. You can go out, you can just take a picture of something and it'll help you identify it. And you can then, of course, run it through. I'll go through iNaturalist, I'll look at the book. Often I really love YouTube for kind of double checking to make sure I have the right mushroom. Gosh, for the life of me, I can't remember the name of this YouTube channel. I'll need to find it and I can send it along later. But there are some really great foragers on YouTube that you can watch that can be really great resources. But that's kind of where I've started, is finding mushrooms that are rather popular, that don't have a lot of lookalikes, and just kind of going from there, using all the resources you can to kind of double check yourself, cross-reference, find friends who may also, you know, be a little bit more experienced at foraging than you. And after a while, you'll start getting more of a feel for like the anatomical parts of the mushroom and feel a little bit more confident over time. But yeah, that's kind of where I've started, at least. Yeah,
thank you so much. I would also add, learn your trees. I think the trees are the best indicator for getting out there and finding the different types of mushrooms.
Yes, and by you saying learn your trees, it just reminded me the YouTube channel I was thinking of is called Learn Your Land, I believe. And that's a pretty good resource for like kind of getting used to and learning about different foraging, mushroom foraging stuff.
Well, thank you so much. That was so informational. And once again, very jealous that I cannot partake as well. So folks, I think that is going to finish us up with the Vermont Wild Kitchen for this evening. I just want to thank everyone who tuned in, everyone who left comments, and of course, a huge thank you to Abigail and Jeff and Steffi for sharing their knowledge, sharing their kitchens with us, and unfortunately not being able to share the food. So moving on from here, we're going to be doing this again the next third Thursday of March, which is going to be March 18th. And we're actually really excited because we're going to be having Jesse Lawyer, who's an Abenaki chef in Burlington, and he's going to be demonstrating a complete Abenaki meal with wild ingredients. So definitely encourage you all to tune in. And in the meantime, please share with us your Vermont Wild Kitchen recipes and stories. You can use the hashtag VTWildKitchen on Instagram, or just shoot us a message on Facebook or email. And once again, folks, thank you for tuning in, and I wish you all a good night.